Hello and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. And the Griquas have just beaten the Sigma Lions 41 points to 31 with a bonus point in Johannesburg after the Lions were reduced to 40 men in about the 50th minute after EW Viljoen was red carded. And after that, the Griquas then running in a couple of tries to sort of, end the game. And I'm going to go on a bit of a rant. I'm going to warn you now. And let me first say right off the bat, as a Lions supporter, it was a horrible game from the Lions. They did not pitch up. The decision-making was poor. They were sloppy. They deserved to be beaten today. The referee and the referee was not the reason we lost the match today. I'm going to put that out right there, so you can't actually go after me for that. What I will say is that was the worst sort of game officiating I've watched in a very, very long time. Throughout the entire Super Rugby and Currie Cup, we had more and more questions asked about the standard of officiating in this country. And Rasta Wenger, probably just as a result of what he was doing today, was one of the worst matches I've watched in a long time. It was so horrendous. The officiating was so substandard. It was actually a genuine joke. And it's not even necessarily the final call, but I mean, when you're sitting there and what you're saying doesn't line up with what you're seeing, with what you're hearing, and what you then get told from your TMO and not lining it up, it was just an absolute joke of a match. We cannot have matches with refereeing displays like that. Cannot. And once again, the Lions deserve to lose. They were horrible. And I've got to feel really, really sorry for Frankie Horn, who at 22 years old has to sit there and try and answer questions for why a union who were in 3 Super Rugby finals in a row have let themselves become the side that deserves to be dropped out of Super Rugby. That is where the Lions are currently sitting at. They don't deserve to be in the United Rugby Championship based on what they're currently acting like. They are acting like a union who is a second division Currie Cup side. There are no signings. There's no direction. There's no looking to try and add to the coaching side. There's no big investment. There's no sort of big moves that we seem to be making. We're sort of just carrying on with what we've kind of got and trying to sort of make do. There are some talented players in that union. But until that union starts acting like one of the top 4 unions, starts bringing in investment, starts bringing in players, they are never going to compete in the United Rugby Championship. But in terms of the refereeing performance today, I mean, in the first half, there were issues with the Griquas where the Lions were they were almost had 2 scrum halves, stuff like that, and offside. And it took Rasta Wenger about 3 line-outs before he actually realized what was going on and penalized the Lions for that. In the second half, off the bat, on the second half, the first 10-15 seconds, there was a contest between Ruan Steenkamp and Ras Makwana off the kickoff. It was knocked off against Ruan Steenkamp. It then comes off Makwana, pretty much goes behind him, and Birgit Odendaal jumped on it and ran over and dotted it down. They went upstairs. The TMO said, I can't find conclusive evidence. The on-field decision was a try, by the way. On-field decision is a try, which means the TMO has to find a reason not to award it. The TMO said there's a clear knock-on by Green, by the Griquas, and he says, but there's no conclusive evidence that there was a knock-on from the Lions player. And Rasta Wenger then, from that, somehow interprets, oh, okay, so there's a knock-on from both, and we'll restart with the scrum. The red card incident happened in the 54th minute. The only reason the Griquas are in that position is because the Lions were on the attack. Manu Russ was running full tilt, gets tackled, not sort of stopped in his tracks, gets tackled as he goes, momentum carries him forward, and Rasta Wenger, literally within seconds, blows it and says, no, he was rolling. If you're running full tilt and you don't get stopped in your tracks, it's one of those sort of tackles on the side and stuff like that, momentum is always going to take you forward. Manu Russ didn't even have time to attempt to try and actually continue rolling. Boom, rolling immediately. The red card interpretation, it was a horrible tackle by EW Viljoen, It was head-on-head collision. It was very, very high. But the collision was as he was going, he took his right arm and his shoulder-to-head contact, which is a red card, but at the same time had his entire arm wrapped around the chest of JC Null. And yet the interpretation is, didn't attempt to wrap. I don't understand. If your arm is not around the chest of somebody, how is that not an attempt to wrap? I don't understand that interpretation. I actually want to go find a freeze frame, and I want to ask you, I'm going to put it out there and say, just in terms of the interpretation, how can you say there's no attempt to wrap when he's literally got his arm around the player? And then, the yellow card. So the Griquas, after the red card, it all just sort of fell apart for the Lions. The Griquas went to the side. Literally, 54th minute was the red card by EW Viljoen. At that stage, it was 19 points to 20 in favor of the Griquas. So it was a 1-point game, really, really close. The Lions were looking a little bit better. And then after the red card, Edwin Cater, literally a minute later, they space out wide, kick over the top there, and Edwin Cater strolled over. George Whitehead nailing the kick. The Lions hit back with Ruan Dreher, and Jordan Henderson making it a 1-point game and thinking, here we go, game on. But then, boom, Edwin Cater, once again, 66 minutes. He scored a hat-trick today. 67 minutes, George Whitehead as the extras. Edwin Cater, 70th minute, George Whitehead. And just as you think, well, it's going to be big off the lines anyway, off the kickoff, we go through, I don't want to lie to you, about 15 to 20 phases. And then the Lions in trying to attack. What was clearly a deliberate knockdown, I mean, they literally, as he's passing about, tends to be stuck his hand up and basically slapped the ball, which should have been a penalty to begin with. Was going to be a knock-on and just a scrum. I don't understand that at all. And then he says, but there was a clean-out. And they went back about 3 or 4 phases, couldn't find the clean-out. They had to go back to the restart, which is about 2.5 minutes. Let's actually look. So, I mean, it was 71 minutes was the conversion. The yellow card came in the 73rd minute. We had to re-watch pretty much 2 minutes of full play to try and find this clean-out. And then, even the clean-out itself, it's Tennis de Beer is about to go into the ruck and then pulls out of it. And Duncan Matthews is coming from a distance, and this is head-on-head collision. I think it's a rugby collision if you ask me. I think that's the definition of a rugby collision. But boom, yellow card. Thank you. And I mean, the Travis Gordon went over in the 79th minute from the Lions to get a consolation try. But the point is that it was just a game where the officiating was just horrendous. And a better ref, I don't know if it would have made a difference in the scoreline. I think the Lions deserved to lose, and I think that they got what they deserved. Because I think it's a union and that just sort of shows you where the union is. But if that is the standard of officiating, I don't want to watch rugby like that. It was a horrible game. It was a waste of 2 hours for me. It really, really was. The officiating was poor. The communication about it was poor. It really was a shocking display. But I mean, you look at the possession. This is the frustration. 68% possession for the Lions, 70% territory. So they had the opportunities. I mean, tries. They managed 5 tries to the Lions, but defensively were nowhere after that red card. They ran more meters. They beat more defenders. They had more clean. Griquas had more clean breaks, more gain on carries for the Lions, more passes, more offloads, more turnover. The same amount of turnovers won. More rucks won. But defense. Explain to me for the Lions how you plan on winning anything or competing with anything when you are missing, 40% of your tackles. You can't. You cannot compete if you're missing 41% of your tackles. In comparison, Griquas are operating at a 70% tackle success rate, which on a normal day isn't great. But when you're then comparing that to 59%, you look pretty marvelous. Ruck success rate was pretty solid. Line-out success for the Lions. They lost 2 in the first half. Wasn't great for the Griquas either. The Lions, but I mean, and you got to wonder about the decision making. I mean, there were over 35 penalties today, by the way. 35 penalties. That's almost a penalty every 2 minutes. We can't watch rugby like that. We cannot watch rugby like that. 35 penalties, 2 yellow cards. It was a disgrace. But for the Lions, the decision making, you've got to question the decision making. I think they won about 6 or 7 scrum penalties, and yet every single time they won a penalty, they had to go for the line. And yet, how many mauls were defended from the Griquas? Jordan Henderson kicked the ball dead twice from a penalty, and yet we still went from going for the lines. Where we could have just, if we continued scrumming like the way we were, the Griquas would have had no front row left on the field. So for the Griquas, a deserved 41-31 victory. It's good to see them playing well. It's good to see them scoring tries, but that spectacle was ruined by a terrible refereeing performance, which just put me in a bad mood and made me not want to watch rugby. I don't want to watch rugby if it's going to be like that. It's such a big spotlight on South Africa refereeing at the moment, and it really is not looking good. But let me know what you think. I mean, the people in the chat were sort of agreeing. They were saying that was a horrible refereeing performance. But let me know what you thought in the comments below. As I said, take nothing away from the Griquas. The Lions were really, really bad today, and the Griquas took their chance and made them count after with the man advantage. But I do think it was just a horrible display of refereeing. But let me know what you thought. Smash like and video, subscribe to the channel as well. My name is Steven, and I'll chat to you guys soon.